Hi, welcome again. So we're going to have Jens today, the founder of the Me-based company, a very good friend of mine as well. And we spent hours of cooking delicious food, eating food and talking about food. And he's been really inspiring for me as well in terms of what does it mean to eat healthy and sustainable. And I just watched these videos the other day and I was shocked again, like how much of an impact we do really have of our food choices and what we consume. So it's really, a topic close to my heart to understand, to save our planet, but at the same time eat well and healthy and especially delicious as well, as food should always be a joy or enjoyment as well. So I'm really happy to have Jens here today, and I'll hand over to you.
Well, thank you very much for that lovely introduction, Annika. I really appreciate it. And I'm not going to have to elaborate any further on our relationship with food and our discussions. It's a fantastic thing that we share. I think I obviously firstly want to say thank you as well for the opportunity to be here today and talk to you about the incredible transformative power of making more conscious food choices and what that looks like in the context of the global picture and sort of our own health and energy and so on. But I'm going to start by telling you a little story from my childhood, so you know where the journey sort of started for me. And when I was a little kid, I used to be outside and playing all the time. I was one of these so-called nature children or something, you know. I was just really into climbing trees and just being outside as much as possible. So you can only imagine the incredible excitement I felt when my family had moved to a new home just north of Copenhagen. And the first thing I wanted to do was to run around and see what the back garden looked like. And there I was dumbstruck, not by our own backyard, but by the fact that next door in the neighbor's backyard, it was this completely overgrown wilderness full of gnarly trees and vines and so on. And I thought, my God, this must be what the jungle looks like. You know, it's incredible. So it turns out there was an old lady who was living in there, and she'd been there for like 50 years, a solitary creature. And so this patch of land hadn't literally been touched for about 5 decades. So it was incredible to see what nature can do in just such a relatively short period of time. And every day when I would come home from school, I would play in there in my little jungle paradise. And that went on for about a year or so, until one day I came home from school to the sound of chainsaws that were cutting down this entire place. And in the matter of a few days, it was all gone. And I was devastated because I couldn't understand as a little kid why anyone in their right mind would want to do something like that to such a place. And my mom was trying to explain to me that the old lady had died and some distant relatives had inherited this place and they just wanted a lawn. And I was like, what? Why do you want a lawn when you can have a rainforest? You know, this makes no sense to me. And it left some deep sort of, an emotional impact on me. And then later on, I started finding out that it wasn't just my little neighbor's jungle haven that was being ravaged, but actually all over the world, human activities are doing great damage to the ecosystems on which we all depend. And initially that got me incredibly frustrated because like a lot of people still, I think we feel quite powerless because we can't directly influence what's going on here. When I started realizing that actually food choices, and in particular the consumption of meat, and also the way we do seafood, is actually one of the key drivers of deforestation, climate change, problems with public health. So when I realized this, I thought that is great, because that must mean that I can make a difference. Basically that's how it all started. But before we get into how we can change the world by changing the way we eat, which is all well and good, I think there's something that's much more relevant and important to talk about, which is actually the point of this presentation today, and that is how we eat healthy first and foremost, how we take care of ourselves. And interestingly, I think that if we want to eat healthy, we should actually stop thinking so much about eating healthy, because eating healthy is very much about having a healthy relationship with food. It's not necessarily so much about what we eat, and I think we're now finding ourselves in what one of my favorite investigative journalists named Michael Pollan has written a book called In Defense of Food, about how we are finding ourselves in this age of nutritionism, where we've stopped eating food and we're thinking about nutrients, we're thinking about macros, we're thinking about counting calories. Now this is bad, now that is bad, and then you've got Instagrammers and bloggers offering up all these incredibly unobtainable, really, ideals of what healthy eating looks like. And so we thought, that surely there must be a more interesting and fun alternative to this, that fundamentally recognizes something which is very, very important. And that is that food is joy. Eating is not just something we do to fuel our bodies. Eating is something we do as a cultural act, it's a social act, it's an ecological act as well, but it's a very distinct thing that humans do. Animals feed, humans eat. It's a completely different thing altogether. And it's very important to remember that as we move on and then explore, what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? Because that's really where it's at. And so, again, coming back to this notion of not making healthy eating about diet fads and isms and so on, we essentially came up with this sweet little analogy that as a gentle guideline, and that is when you think about a bear, unless she's a polar bear, but when you think about a bear actually eats, contrary to popular belief, mostly plants. And it doesn't eat all the highly processed foods and factory farmed animals that are so very problematic for our own personal health and also indeed for the planet. Although the bear has no concept of seasonal or local, she eats nothing else. And therefore the bear is actually a very good analogy for a way that we as people can also eat, which respects personal choice and respects cultures and traditions, because if we are to hope to make changes to our own behaviors and to the wider, to the wider society, it has got to start when it comes to food with a deep respect for people's cultures and traditions and their food backgrounds. In practical terms, what does it mean to eat like a bear? Well, it means that we are eating mostly plants. Now I can talk for myself only, of course, because I eat like a bear. I eat mostly plants. And then I eat less. When I use meat once in a while, I use less but better quality meat for flavor rather than being the main thing. And then where are my proteins coming from? I will come back to that, but I can say that there are three fantastic food groups you have to think about. Those being pulses, so the dried seeds technically of edible legumes, so peas, beans, lentils, chickpeas, lupins, and so on. And then you have whole grains, which is another source of protein, and then seeds and nuts, which are a fantastic source of protein and also essential fats. And if you're eating those three for your proteins and then lots of vegetables, you are essentially eating a well-balanced diet, which is great for your health and also good for the planet, because as it turns out, pulses in particular, they help return nitrogen to the soil. And I don't know if anybody has watched Kiss the Ground lately. If you haven't, it's part of some links to a deck I will send you after this presentation. So don't worry about taking notes. There's going to be a slide deck that everybody will receive afterwards. That's going to come with the main points and also some links, amongst others, to this fantastic film about the importance of soil health if we are to fix the issue of climate change, namely because the carbon is in the atmosphere. Where should it be? It should be in the soil. Pulses and generally thinking about soil health and how we can support soil health is a very important part of the solution. And the great thing about soil health is also that the healthier the soils are, the better the produce that come from those soils will be for our health. So it's all connected. And before and now, there was sort of the theoretical part, you could say. So before I move on into an actual cooking demonstration, does anyone at this stage have any questions? Going once, going twice, and we will be moving on now then. to the really fun part, which is how do we then, take this eat like a bear philosophy? How do we take this notion of these four main food groups, the pulses, the whole grains, the vegetables, and the seeds and the nuts, and how do we put that into our everyday eating practices? So I will be giving you a little demonstration here where today, and this is unashamedly me doing some product placement here for our fantastic, in this case, it's a jerk spiced Carlin piece. And the reason we're I'm showing you this is because the issue with pulses and getting your proteins and pulses is that they can take a long time to cook. So basically with the meal-based code, that is just what we do. We spend 48 hours preparing something like this. And then what you get is basically pulses, which contain fiber and proteins and are also a source of low GI carbohydrates. You get that and a sauce essentially, which just cuts down the time it takes to make a really, really healthy meal massively. And it's a lot more interesting than a tin of blend chickpeas. So we got those. In this case, it's Red Fox Carlin peas. And then the other bit here, I've got the whole grains is some barley, which are already cooked actually a while ago. And then whenever I do whole grains, it's a good idea to do a lot and then freeze it, because it still has the husk on. It sort of doesn't clump together the same way. So it's actually a really, really smart hack. Use your freezer, to keep whole grains around. And of course, I'm not saying that you should religiously be eating whole grains all the time. If you want to eat some white rice, some pasta, whatever, bread or what it might be. What I'm saying is that eating like a bear and eating healthily is about what we do 80-90% of the time. And it's about working and getting those small, consistent habits into the way we do things on a day-to-day basis. So barley here, and then again, I buy these seeds, these like nut seed mixes. It's like an omega seed mix, and I do the same with these nut mixes. They sell them in Holland and Barrett. They're great if you don't want to be mixing your own. And then in the vegetable department today is just some broccoli and some peppers that I have done a little sort of a saute with. And then I'm just going to show you another little great principle, which is how to just steam kale or any other leafy green you might have, or any other vegetable for that matter. How to steam that using just water and a little bit of fat and a tiny bit of soy sauce, if you like umami, like I do. I'm a fiend when it comes to umami, because it's so very good to make vegetables interesting. And just before I move ahead here, as you can sort of tell, I've not been mentioning any recipes at all. And there's a specific reason for that. And this is because if you really want to learn how to feed yourself consistently on a day-to-day basis, you should be learning the fundamental principles underlying all your favorite recipes. So when it comes to vegetables, sauteing, stir frying, steaming them with a little bit of fat, roasting them, raw marinating, doing them into a slaw. There's so many different things you can do with actually 6 or 7 different methods of preparation. And now you can put all of these together and combine them in literally thousands of different ways. So you never get bored and you never have to use a recipe book unless you really want to. And so what is going to happen is that I wasn't going to bore you with this whole process, but I sliced up some broccoli and some peppers and some onion, and I put that onto a pan, and then I just sauteed that until I thought it looked delicious, and it's sort of nice and soft, and I seasoned it a little bit. So this basically will become, along with this barley, sort of just like a quick fried barley type of thing. And then all I'm going to do is just heat up these peas here with the sauce. And then I'm going to steam that kale, put it all on a plate. And then what I end up with is a really nourishing home-cooked meal in very, very little time, which is the aim here. Right. So now that's heating up. I'm just gonna once again underline the efficacy and how fantastic it is to use poultice as your one of your main sources of protein, because again, protein is one of these things that's very taxing for the planet to produce. If we get our proteins from animals, those animals have to be fed something, and that something has to be grown somewhere. And so therefore, what we're technically doing is we're taking this much gross amount of food and we're turning it into a smaller net amount of food. And I think this is not news to most people anymore that this is happening. And then you've then got all these, fake meat products and so on that are emerging, which there's nothing wrong with that. Personally, I haven't found one I like yet. And I just think there's something really beautiful about eating a protein that comes straight out of the ground, exactly as nature intended it, which just happens to also be very, very good for that soil it's being grown in. And in 2016, the United Nations celebrated the first global Pulse Day, the International Day of Pulses, because all over the world, like if you go to India, for instance, and many places in Africa and so on, pulses is still the foundation of the diet. And it used to be like that with most peasant cuisines all over the world, the French, the Italian, you find examples of pulse-based dishes all over where meat is used again for flavor, and if we're using plants as our main source of protein, and then we're using less but better quality meat and dairy for flavor rather than being the main thing, then not only is our personal health on a good trajectory, we're also really doing our bit for the planet. And it doesn't mean that we have to look at eating meat or not eating meat in this binary view in which it's all often presented. I think the important thing is that everybody acknowledges that our choices do have consequences. And if we then choose to do nothing, well, I'm completely fine with that. I think the important thing is just the awareness of the fact that we can make a difference. And now, I'm going to bring you a little bit closer to what's happening here. Okay. Right. So basically, I've got my trusty VOC going here, and then this is actually a really good little trick. I picked it up from the Heston Blumenthal documentary I was watching at some point. So it's just a little bit of water at the bottom, like about half an inch of water, and then a little bit of fat. So it could be olive oil or it could be butter if you prefer. But any good quality oil, and just a little bit. You could do it without the addition of umami. That's just me being an umami fiend. And a touch of salt. These, I always pre-wash all my vegetables before I put them in the fridge so they're ready to go as and when I need them. Lid goes on, and that's it. In about 3 minutes, that will be ready. And then, in the meantime, I'm just going to turn on this other pan here, and you could imagine that what's happening over here. In this pan, so that would have just happened sort of in one go, so you chop the vegetables up, chuck them in a pan, roast them off, and then you chuck the barley in. And all in all, we're talking something like 5-10 minutes. So again, I think what I'm disseminating here is not a sort of magic bullet for being able to cook without applying any effort. Again, I think it's about saying why is it important, to you? Is it important to you to cook more of your meals yourself. For me personally, the reason it's important is because I don't want the man to be cooking my meals. You know, I don't want corporations and people who don't have my best interest at heart or that of the planet to be cooking my meals. So there's that. And then there's also, if you are serious about eating a lot of vegetables, you know, there's just no, you got to do it yourself, because you never get enough vegetables when you buy takeaways or whatever. It's expensive for kitchens to do this. There's a lot of labor in it. Plus, they're not going to be completely fresh when they've been cut and whatever with ready meals sat on the fridge, God knows how long. And then I think there's also the important thing, if you do have the opportunity, let's say you have a family or you have flatmates, you know, to cook and eat together, it brings proven mental health benefits. It's part of why the Mediterranean diet is incredibly good, because people eat together, you know. So if I'm going to sum it up, then really, you know, buy proper ingredients, unprocessed ingredients, natural ingredients, cook your own food and eat together as much as possible. And that's it. Now, I probably would have just fried that off for a little bit longer, but I'm not going to bore you with that. So we just call it done. And then it's sort of like a warm, now it's a warm salad, party salad. And then I will put it all on a plate, and then if you haven't already got yourself a pair of tongs, I cannot recommend them warmly enough. So you see the kale is now, I don't like it like over super done, so still a bit al dente, but that's basically it. And you can see some of the water sort of evaporated, and then the oil just sort of glazes almost, I would say, the whatever it is that you're doing using this principle on. Really, really, really good trick. And there we go. So basically, this is now, you've got the whole grains in here, along with some vegetables, and then you got some the steamed oil steamed kale, and then you've got the peas there. And then again, now to just make that complete, you add some nuts or some seeds so that you vary it. You could add both if you wanted to. We're gonna add some seeds as well in this case. And then this is sort of the you could say the core element. And now if you wanted to add, say, you know, a little bit of cheese, or you add some high quality grilled chicken or something, you know, these are jerk inspired peas, would make sense to add a little bit of chicken in there. But then again, the chicken is there as a supporting act. It's not there for as the main star of the show. And I guarantee you that when you start eating like this, after some time, you will just feel so much more energetic, because it's easier for our bodies to digest this kind of stuff, you know, and there's tons and tons of fiber in it. And a lot of people are not getting enough fiber, basically. So now I'm just adding a little bit of some lovely organic yogurt to this. And then I'm going to top it off with some parsley. And now it looks like this. So there you have it. And again, the vegetable element here could literally be, you know, any combination of vegetables that you saute in a pan. It could be roasted vegetables, it could be as a salad. And I think really getting comfortable with what to do with vegetables would be where I would start my journey with food, depending on where you are. I think one can never get too good at doing vegetables. And again, when you see this, the slide deck we sent out, there's going to be a list of the principles or the methods, techniques that we recommend learning. And if you are interested in learning more about cooking with principles, please do follow our newsletter. I think my partner Michael might put a link in the chat. And then we will basically on a weekly basis be showing you different principles, and also once in a while we put out a newsletter where we talk about public health and soil health and farming, and essentially how we can be part of a movement to change the world by changing the way we eat, and why that doesn't mean that we all need to become vegan. It's fantastic for those who want to go full on plant-based. Great. We're here to say that it's within everybody's grasp to make a difference through food, and it's about defining what that looks like to you, and finding out what having that healthy relationship or that comfortable relationship where you're eating what you feel like is good for you, and where you're having a good time doing it. So I think with that, I'm gonna bring it over to the Q and A.
Thank Jens. Thank you. That was nice. I put in the chat that people can put questions in there, but we don't have any in there so far. So I'm going to ask my first question is, I find it hard, for example, with living in a city and then making sure you get, for example, high quality animal products such as, dairy or also meat. So as we're not living in the countryside, you can just go to a farm and know exactly where it comes from and talk to people basically, raising those animals, whatever. Like how do we know, and where can we go here in London that's affordable for the average person, but we actually can trust the source?
That's a great question. We'll actually be putting a few links in there as well. I mean, in the slide deck. And I think if you haven't already come across it, a great website is there's a farmers market directory of all of London, where you can see farmers markets all over. It's actually, we do live in a city which is endowed with a fair few very good farmers markets. And then I would say there's also veg box schemes, where a lot of them have now started including dairy and so on, which is another avenue. And then I guess depending on where you live in London, there are more and more shops I've seen pop up that are more independent. But we will put links, some good ideas for that into the slide deck. So there's something to go on.
Cool, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you want to have a look in the chat, or should I read it out? We have another question from Alia, who asked, do you have any tips to manage sizes, or how much time it takes when you're only cooking for yourself?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Mm-hmm. Do you have any tips on how to manage size? So when you're just cooking for yourself, and how much it takes when you do that for yourself? I guess it refers to what you've been doing right now, or maybe Ali, you can unmute yourself and explain a bit in more detail what exactly you mean.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so obviously I'm usually only cooking for just me, and I'm always worried about wasting things. Yeah. So I kind of shy away sometimes from like buying fresh vegetables, because I don't want to then have it sitting in my fridge and I just like can't be bothered to cook or whatever, and I just don't end up cooking with it. Do you have any tips?
Okay, yes, I get the question now. Yes, great question. And you are exemplifying the exact pain point that we are addressing here, which is that if you think about recipe by recipe, and then you're bound to you're gonna end up wasting things. Whereas if you think of your home cooking more as a flow, so let's say I've got this bit here left over now, yeah. So this tomorrow, I'm already looking at this thinking, I'll fry that off again, and then maybe I'll add an egg or something to it. Or maybe I'll put it into like a Spanish omelet. Or maybe I'll chop up some more vegetables and just use that again. Or maybe I'll just eat it cold, straight out of the fridge, or I'll turn it into a salad. I'll take some cabbage, slice that finely, maybe massage it a little bit with some salt and a little bit of lemon juice, maybe some lemon zest. And then I'm going to add that in there, and then it becomes a salad the next day. So I personally, and I'm very proud to say this, I waste nothing, zero. And it was something I really, for me, this whole food waste thing and how to think about your cooking as a flow, for me, really was something I learned when I was living in China in connection with studying Mandarin. And so I was staying with this old Chinese couple in Beijing for 2 months. And they had seen real hardship. You could feel that, because they would go, and this is also where I picked up, really started to think about, okay, meat in a different way, because she would take it to the market, she'd buy loads of vegetables, big bag of rice, heads of cabbages and so on. And then she'd buy a little tiny piece of meat, and then she'd chop that up, little bit by bit every single day, and she'd use maybe 50 grams to flavor a dish. But what was really interesting is that nothing was ever wasted, because she just kept recycling into new dishes that fit, So if you think about fried rice, for instance, what is fried rice? Well, fried rice is a dish where you get rid of all your things. In Italy, the way they use tomato sauce is it's just you chuck anything in there, just get rid of it, You have fried noodles as well. It's a fantastic principle, because you can literally put anything into fried noodles. I mean, I've got these vegetables here. I've got a bit of extra kale as well, some parsley. I don't know exactly what I'll do with it yet, but I would say the default option is literally just turn on a pan, and then just chop it up, put it into a pan. And if you add heat, it's gonna taste good. That would just sauteing. But again, I would say if you're interested in learning about this, sign up for the newsletter, and then this is literally our mission is to help you not waste food and just be comfortable cooking for yourself more.
Thank you.
Sorry, that was a very long answer. Got me very excited.
No, that was really useful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Also, maybe, hi, Aslis here. What do you think about the frozen vegetables? Because obviously, if you are by yourself and cooking by yourself, you can use frozen vegetables too. I know it's not as good as fresh, maybe, but what do you think about those?
No, so again, I think coming back to, we have to have a healthy relationship with food. It should not be about obsession and sitting on a soul cycle and, only going to the farmer's market or whatever, That's great when we can do that. But obviously, and interestingly, you asked this because yesterday I recorded a video where I used a bag of frozen vegetables. To be fair, I've never done this before actually, but it was just to show that, yes, I mean, if always have one, I'm gonna have one always lying around now, because actually I found out this is really, really smart. They retain nutrients. I read up about it. They retain nutrients quite well. It's not gonna be like a fresh vegetable, but I think if there's a difference between you spending 175 on a kilo of mixed frozen vegetables and buying some crappy ready meal or taking something from Deliveroo, obviously frozen vegetables, so yeah, definitely I'm all for it. Also frozen berries and so on. I think it always hurts me to see or makes me a bit sad to see this kind of lack of an understanding of seasonality that people have, so they eat like blueberries all year long, and most of the time they actually are flown in from Chile, blueberries or somewhere far away. And so it's better actually to eat them frozen or dried during the the winter months. So yeah, go for it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually just thinking about that because like what I sometimes do when I actually feel like, oh, I'm not going to be able to use those veggies now, although that's quite rarely the case, because I think once you start eating so much vegetables, it's hard to actually have them come off. But when I was just thinking now, when you freeze them, I know when you cut fruit or vegetables, anything through the cutting, that already lose some nutrients and things. So when I freeze them in, is it better to like freeze them in a hole, or is it okay just cut them and then straight away into the freezer?
No, we're talking about using bags of frozen vegetables where
I know, but like your own fruit and vegetables, something you can freeze as well when you feel like it might.
No, I personally don't ever get around to that. You know, what I do is I cook batches of grains, and then I'll do pulses, you know, and again that's where you can use a shortcut like the meal base if you don't want to spend hours cooking pulses. So I kind of have the basis ready in there, you know, and then like things like tomato sauce as well, you know, make 5 kilos of that, have stuff like that in your freezer, you know, and then the odd bag of, you know, if you have a bag of frozen vegetables for when whatever the shit hits the fan, and it's got to be real quick. But no, I tend to, what I do is I'll usually, like, my ideal week looks like I go to the farmer's market on a Sunday, and then there's this place, Paracourt Farm is a great one. I'm an angel, you know, so they just come in and they throw big boxes of stuff on the ground. It is very low key, and you can pick up a massive bag of vegetables for like nothing, you know. It's all like seasonal stuff, you know, just like that, you know. And I don't even know, just a big bag. I'll take it home, wash all of it, you know. And I think this is another absolute super hack: is fill your sink with water, wash it all so that it's done, and then pre-chop it maybe a little bit, put it in boxes, plastic boxes, and then have it in your fridge so that when you're cooking during the week, you can just open up the fridge and be, I mean, sometimes the way I cook, and I kid you not, I'll put the pan on, I'll put a wok on, for instance. I'll just turn it on so that now it's heating up, and then I'll open the fridge and figure out what I'm gonna do. Because it's already, I don't need to wash it again and again and again. Think about you're just doing that step once instead of having to do it again and again and again. And then you're kind of setting yourself up for, right, I'm going to get through these vegetables this week somehow. So that they don't tend to, they don't end up in the freezer. I eat them. And sorry, I don't know if that answered that, but I guess what would I do? I would, slice them up and then put them in the freezer straight away. I think that's also what they say in these bags, is that they retain nutrients because they basically get them processed very quick, you know, so they're like out of the ground, sliced up, and then into the freezer. So if you were to do that, yes, that's what I would do.
That once I've heard that you can do that, but our freezers at home are not as good as the freezers that they're using in factories. So that's why when you chop your vegetables or other stuff, you can freeze them, but you may not get the same quality as you would buy, I don't know, frozen peas. Right. I don't know if that's right.
That makes sense to me.
That's why, that's why I don't do it, because they're not strong enough. I don't know how do you describe it.
Yeah, but I would also say, I mean, I guess there's also an approach to when you have vegetables, like a head of cabbage will last for a very long time, whereas if you have tomatoes lying around, you might use those first. Just go through the stuff that perishes quicker than leafy greens and so on, you know. And then your onions you can always have around. Carrots are great if you put them in a water bath; they can stay there for almost indefinitely. But yeah, there's all the great hacks in the kitchen as well, which is also something that we like to talk about, you know. So I think it's, you know, my personal journey with food has been almost 25 years now, and along the way I've been in various kitchens, you know, never working as a chef, but just been in kitchens, there's lots of great things that they do in the world of professional cooking that we can then take and sort of modify and translate into something we can use at home, which sets us up for everyday cooking success, you could almost say. And again, this is the kind of stuff that we are constantly working on disseminating and getting people to be able to use, really, making it useful. Good.
I think there's no more questions. I mean, I could keep talking about this, the other thing I just thought about, because you mentioned in between buying seasonal and local and thing, and that's something I think when I talk to people I find really difficult as well, because we think, or like when you go and you buy in a supermarket your fruit and vegetables, for example, and you don't have the chance to go to market, for example, like what would you look at? Is it the local, like where is it from, or is it organic, or like what's the kind of like best thing? Because today I was just learning there again, organic apples, but then they're from New Zealand. I'm like, I don't even know what's better or worse now, to buy local, to buy organic, or you know.
No, but I think this is a great, fantastic question. I'm glad you bring up an apple, you know, because apples right now could not be further out of season. Actually, they grow in autumn in this country. So that's why they're coming from New Zealand now. So apples are not a thing right now. In fact, like right now, there probably isn't the worst time for fruit and veg right now, because it's all just sort of like coming out, you know, then all summer and autumn. But then I think when it comes to seasonality, and I'm gonna try and keep this brief because there's more. I wrote a big white paper on what you need to know about sourcing, you know, so we can share a link to that as well. But essentially, it's about understanding that obviously we're not extreme about it. We're not saying that you should only eat what's grown in the UK, you know. But when it comes to peaches, for instance, what is our peach season? Well, our peach season is the Italian, French, and Spanish peach season. Our orange season is not the South African orange season. It's the Spanish and the Greek orange season, you know. So we think regionally about what's in season, you know. Then I think it's, again, they have to put it on the thing, you know. So if I go into a supermarket and I see blueberries that are coming from Chile, I avoid them, you know, because if it comes from that far away and it's a soft fruit, it's a good thing to think about. Like any soft fruit, asparagus as well, anything that perishes quickly, if it comes from far away, it's been air freighted 100%. And what we essentially want to avoid is air freighted fruit and veg, because that is just, you know, doesn't make any sense at all to be flying things around the planet, you know. And then suddenly one food calorie is like 100 fossil fuel calories, you know. So that just, and also it doesn't taste very good because it's been picked and then, you know, transported and on a plane, and you know, so it doesn't have any much flavor really. So that's kind of my recommendation on seasonality would be make an effort to become aware. You know, we'll put links to seasonality. Good you say that, Annika, actually. So we'll make sure to put some links to the seasonality calendars that we use in the deck as well. So there's something simple. So in case you don't want to read my entire white paper on the subject, you can just use some seasonality calendars. Great.
Cool, thanks.
Okay.
One other question.
I really love the
From Ashley, to use pressure cookers for grains, as it takes less time to do that. I know I've heard from people that they really love it and they don't want to be about it anymore.
Absolutely, I think yes, you know, barley takes, it can, if it's a really fresh and with the husk on and everything, you know, it can take hours to cook, and pulses even more so. So yeah, that can definitely help shorten time. I don't have one personally, but absolutely all for it.
Great. If there's no more questions, I think that's probably it for today. Thank you so much. Anna said as well, she found it really helpful, and thanks for sharing your tips and ideas. And I can definitely relate to that. Thank you so much for joining us today. As Jens already said, he's going to send out a little handout with the most important information from today, and then some ideas and links and sources to find out more if you want to. Check out the Mia-based code. Depending where you are in London, you are already able to get them. I've been now cooking with them. They're really affordable and really make it so easy and delicious. Like I have those days where I can't be bothered to like cook for an hour or something after work, and that just makes it, as you just saw, literally like 10 minutes. You cook and it still looks nice, it tastes nice, you kind of feel still good about yourself because you ate healthy and sustainable. So yeah, try to try those. It's great. He's also doing a couple of tastings around London at the moment, so maybe you see him around.
I'm not paying Annika to say this, by the way.
No.
And then I think also just because we are in the early stages of developing this, so Michael, my partner, and I, we used to have a business where we were doing transformative office meals, for companies like Airbnb and moving brands and so on, and that was going really well until the pandemic hit. So now we're kind of taking all the knowledge and everything we've learned on these years of basically battling a food industry that needs all of us to become more conscious, and trying to turn that into something that does exactly that, which is empower you and all of us to be able to cook our own meals, and take it to the man and say, no, we won't have it. So in that process, if you have any questions along the way, we are here, and we will, we'll respond to emails and ideas, suggestions, anything we can take on board that will enable us to do a better job for you, essentially. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure.